The last element of easy EML we haven't talked about yet is this intellectual rights category here. Now, even if you don't care how other people reuse your data or reuse your code, it's pretty important to put some sort of license on your code and on your data. There's two reasons for that. First of all, you want to make sure it's understood that the data and code are provided as is, meaning there's no warranty and meaning that you have no liability for misuse of that code or that data. And especially for the code, you also want to make sure that you maintain your own rights to that code. In other words, if somebody else starts using your code and decides to sell a product based on your code, you want to make sure that they can't make a copyright claim back on you if you start to use your code again or make some changes to it and start to reuse it. So it's always a good idea for anything that you share publicly to make sure you have appropriate licenses in play. Now on Easy EML, they give you a couple of different options for really commonly used licenses, and these are Creative Commons licenses of two different types, and they also give you an option to put in something other that you can add below. Now, when we put in these things for EDI, we have both code and data, not just data. So we actually have a couple of different licenses that we say. So if we go back to the R code, and we're going to put this at the very end of our README. This is definitely something you don't want to force people to have to wade their way through if they're just trying to decide if the data are useful or not. And I'm going to grab a section from my notes here that's quite lengthy. And add it to our markdown for this section. So we now have a section called intellectual rights, and this actually has two subsections, second level subsections. The first one being the code license, and the second one being the data license. At the top of intellectual rights, I just have some statements here regarding professional ethics about the reuse of code and making sure that you let the people who collected the data know something if you're planning to use the code. Also, it specifies that there's actually two different licenses depending on whether you're talking about code or data in this particular data product that's covering the whole pipeline. The code license says something about code that is pretty much limited to whatever's in the protocol folder. So any code found in the protocol folder is where this license applies. We have a copyright statement, and then here is the actual legal code text for the MIT license that we tend to use for code. Again, one of the more important aspects of a license for code is to make sure that if somebody does reuse it, they can't prevent you from using it after they've reused it, particularly if they publish something. So this is just saying that, yes, you can use my code, but you have to allow anybody else to use my code as well, including me. And then also we have a data license, and here we use the Creative Commons data license, and it's generally the most open of the Creative Commons licenses and that you can do whatever you want with the data, but this makes sure it says that, you know, we have no liability for misuse of the data. So you can read through that in detail. This is something, again, I have to credit Vinny Baird, my colleague in the library, who put this together with a tremendous amount of detail on exactly how this type of legal language works. So I can save this. I can render the markdown. I can go back to the README file, hit refresh, and again, we have a new automatically numbered section called intellectual right, with two subsections, a code license and a data license subsection with the content as described in the markdown. Note that we're using numbered lists here. So this is an example in markdown of using numbered lists. And if you look at the markdown code, notice that in the markdown, all of the numbers are a 1. That's because it doesn't actually matter what number you use. It's automatically going to number them anyway. So I've just put a 1 for all of them. And anywhere where there's a 1, that's an element of a numbered list. And that gets automatically numbered by Rmarkdown and Pandoc in generating these numbered lists in the README file.